Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to, at this time, call to order the Commission of Virginia to study slavery and subsequently during the Facto racial economic discrimination against African American on August the 23rd, 1:00 p.m. at the State Library in that order. And then at this time, I want to okay, the meeting is called to order. Those who are present. Would you call the names of the commissioners, so present or not? Okay. Thank you. Dominique.
Delegate Quinn,
Here. Present.
Senator Locke, Dr. Ayers,
Here.
Dr. Allen,
Here.
Dr. Douglas,
Here.
Dr. Kenny,
Here.
Dr. Sherry, here, Mr. Richardson, Mr. Watkins. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Again, good afternoon, and we're glad everyone is here so we can go. Hopefully, we won't be here long today, but I do appreciate your time and your efforts in terms of getting here. We're winding down, so it's not much longer in terms of our work. But some great work has been done, so I am eternally grateful for the work that has been done to this point. At this time, we're going to call for the approval of the agenda and the previous meeting minutes. We hope that everyone had an opportunity to look at the minutes. And if you have, at this time, we will call for motion to adopt the agenda and the meeting minutes if there are no revision to it.
So moved.
Okay, motion has been made and properly second for the approval of the minutes and the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, there are none. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to just give my report, and then we would move forward after my report and call in, asking for the project manager, Dominique, who has been just absolutely amazing, and helping to keep us on the straight and the narrow. And that is some job, Dominique, that you have done. So I just want you to know that. Thank you. So this is just update. One of the things that I think all of us, we were under the assumption that the report was due total final in January the 20th of 2024. However, we have found that there is additional time that we have. So under more careful reading, it has been brought to our attention as outlined in the legislation that the January 2023 would be the annual interim report and not the final report. But don't get excited about thinking that you have more work to do until 24. This is because the commission, we officially sunset July the 1st, 2024. And so the final report would not be due until January 2025. Okay. It gives us a little more time, but it's sunset, and so we will have everything ready in time and probably by January 2023. If there's anything else, and Dominique will be on to January 2024, July 1st, 2024. And so that would give us additional time just to make sure everything is clean up, perfected, and ready to go. But it would not be, the final report would not be due until 2025, okay? A report in January is still required. However, it does not have to include all the final recommendations. Okay? Any feedback? And this just kind of just sharing this information. Okay? The last meeting commission discussed holding a larger evening public event on November the 1st. And I think that there is certainly strong consideration given to still having the larger evening event, public event. Any feedback from that? Anyone want to share? I think it's still, once again, give us a little more time to do that.
I personally think that's too close to the election.
Okay. What election? Okay, all right,
And, you know,
okay.
this is, so I think it's evident, we don't really want to be doing something that, that calls our hard work into
Right.
disability before we're really ready.
Okay.
And it makes it
Okay.
it's partisan. Yeah,
Okay.
it's,
Okay,
and also, because we have
more
a
time.
little more time, we should use it to be as ready as possible before we go to the public.
Okay. I don't have any problem, anyone else? I agree with that. Yeah. Okay, all right, so we will look at that date and reconsider. And we can actually, we have between the 24th of, January 24th all the way through July 1, 2024. So any of those months, it would be appropriate. And we can either, we have, next week, we have a couple more meetings prior to that. So we could wait to decide, or we could have a date today, recommended date, and we start working toward.
Would it be appropriate to, since we have to have some sort of interim report in January, to do it close to when that would be available?
Close to or afterwards?
Or afterwards, certainly, but within that month of January, so that we would have already done the work and then be able to sort of report out to the public of where we are halfway.
Okay.
Is part of the purpose of the meeting though to get feedback from
I think it's-
participants?
I think there is, it is to engage the public, or give them the public an opportunity to hear from us what was done. I mean, all of the meetings have been public meetings, so people have had access to come to the meeting or through information that's been put out. So, but I think also that, I don't know if someone comes up and say, I suggest this, that we're going to change it. Now, we may want to have some kind of, it's not necessarily a separate report, but hearing from the public, this is what they have shared with us, a sheet or two that would speak to what the public have shared with us. But I don't know if it's going to be necessarily integrated into the work that we had already done. I don't.
So I have a proposal I'd like to make that I hope doesn't get me driven from the room by longtime friends, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
Okay.
Or new friends, anybody. I think that I agree that we can have something for the public to respond to. I think for us to have that, we're going to need a coherent historical narrative. Since our charge is fundamentally historical, we've got a lot of talent in this building. And on the commission, I'd like to propose that by beginning of February, that we ask Dominique and Greg to have presented a historical overview from things that are broader than the charge of any subcommittee, sort of the colonial history of enslavement in Virginia. And then a brief historical context, as I'm not establishing eye contact with that table yet.
They were looking this way when they were talking.
Historical context for each of the subcommittees.
Okay.
I don't think that people understand. I think our conversation with the public will be a lot more concrete and meaningful if people actually understand how we got to this point.
Okay.
So now looking, I see Greg nodding at me. Dominique, are you nodding and smiling? Yes, okay. And Sandy, I know you're, okay, also, so I feel affirmation here. But we need this anyway. Dominique has done such great work, the bibliography and the amount of historical, this is the place to do this, the credibility comes from it. So I think that's a good way to use this time that we have.
Okay.
Is for us to have the fullest account. And then there's a lot of on the commission itself. A lot of us can look at this and figure out, here's what I would like that. So I don't know if that gives us an exact date in February. Cassandra, I will go, I see you nodding as well. I see your hand is up too. I'm sorry. So what would you like to say relative to this?
Well, first of all, I agree wholeheartedly with your recommendations. And I was just thinking about the Encyclopedia of Virginia, the partnership with the Virginia Humanities and the Library of Virginia. And I thought some of the work that we're doing, or all of the work that we're doing, we should consider asking if that can be incorporated into the encyclopedia, since it is a resource for teachers. And that's the whole point of this, is we want to gather this information and sort of point people in the right direction to help them as they are looking at this important history here in Virginia.
I think that's great, and I know that Virginia Humanities folks would be delighted to have that. He really is one of the national leaders in that whole effort, the decades of the research behind it. So I think when we come out of the gate, doing so with the full, as much credibility
Yes.
as we can have, we'll avoid sort of useless conversation of people challenging the historic foundations of all this, and we can talk about the recommendations. So I think that's great. I see Greg, Dominique nodding as well, Cassandra. So I think that, almost every statement that we could make in this historical overview would have an Encyclopedia of Virginia entry. And so making this an electronic document, you could have that as well. So I think that's great.
That's great. I think that's wonderful. I think I never have looked upon you as being naive, but to think that you're not going to challenge us just because. I'm sorry.
When they do challenge us,
We got to back up.
when we will be questioned about this, I want us to have compelling answers. I think if California's produced 1,000-page document, for us to have a 40 or 50-page document is necessary. But the good thing about all this is that it's taking advantage of one of the most trusted, two of the most trusted organizations in the Commonwealth, the Library of Virginia and Virginia Humanities. That would be hard for people to say, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Whereas if it's sort of commissioned by outsiders or whatever, it would be a different sort of animal. So, okay, I think I'll be late.
I think you're,
That's my goal.
I think that's wonderful, wonderful suggestion, and we think all of us are in total agreement with both of you. Anyone else, anything else they want to add to this?
I won't say it's a code on that. We can get closer. We can pick a date in February.
Okay.
That seems appropriate given where we are. I think we want to have enough time for the commission to see the draft that Greg and Dominique produced. And then so that when we say in public, it has our information on it as well, that our investment stuff. So as we think about what the date might be, whatever they're able to produce, we sort of reverse engineer from that since the date. And there'd be plenty of time between any time in February and July. So we'll have plenty of time. And I can imagine we could learn something from the conversation as well to assume that we have time to incorporate that so that people know that it take advantage not only of all this institutional expertise, the expertise of the commission, but also the expertise of public comment.
Yeah, if I may, I would just co-sign that. It's really important for the commission members to have access to that, be able to respond to it, and for us to integrate some of that into what we present to the public. So as long as we work that timing in, that will be good.
Excellent, excellent. I think it also gives us time to look at or identify people and groups and organizations that we want to be a part of
That's great.
the bigger meeting. And I think we need to be extremely deliberate and intentional in terms, I mean, everybody can be invited, but I think we need to target organizations and individuals who represent organizations to come and to be a part of this program. So noise need to be made in getting us there.
And I think our ability to enlist them is going to be strengthened by us showing them what we're actually
Yes.
talking about.
Absolutely,
Great.
absolutely.
I do think it's important that the historical examination reveals facts. And at the real point, facts are not at dispute. It's the interpretive framework in terms of how you engage the facts. But if we can ever get to, if we can agree on some facts, then we might engage in a conversation how you nuance it and say, and in your interpretive framework, abuse now becomes a benefit. But at least we can agree that this is what
I could
occurred.
never say that.
If we can agree with, some facts. Any discussion around how you interpret those facts and not reality.
Let the church say amen. Okay. All right,
Delegate, if I may.
yes, yes.
As a point of administrative clarity, if, given what you've discussed, there was originally a meeting scheduled for October 18th, which was going to be moved to November 1st to account for this larger meeting. With the larger meeting now moving to February, would your preference be to keep the original October 18th date or move it to November 1st? This meeting still can happen, it doesn't have to happen, it's completely up to you. If you just let me know whether you'd like to keep the original schedule, keep the moved schedule. It could be here at the library, it could be here at the library, we can continue as we have been doing. I would just like a quick clarification on which date.
Selfishly, I prefer to be moved later because I won't be in town.
So no, it'll still be November the 1st, but it'll be here at the library, our standard meeting, 1 o'clock. I'll make the arrangements, thank you.
So that has already been, yeah, that would have been next to discuss, so that's already. And then I think at that meeting or prior to that, we also need to, again, because we discussed the, desire, I think it probably requires more conversation. Every time I think about 1,000 pages of California, and we got 30 pages. I mean, if 30 pages is all we need, then we'll do it. But I think that there needs to be some more additional discussion on the length and the style and the tone of the report. The number of pages to be written and how we, will want that to roll out. You guys that have 25 books already published, you could probably speak a lot more to that than I can. But we need to have it delivered in a way, and I think Dr. Kenny certainly had spoken, to it in terms of what he just said, about, issues of facts and realities and those things. So I think we just want to make sure that as we deliver, whatever we're delivering, we feel we're set for, even if there's a rebuttal or rebuke of it, we still know that it is deeply rooted in facts.
I think Cassandra's point about South Virginia citing facts about every single thing, it could be more streamlined. I mean, the fact that California wrote 1,000 pages and then reduced it, whatever the short version was, to hundreds of pages. What's the point of making a public document that people can't read?
Right.
So I think there's a virtue in being as concrete as we can, directed to these particular issues. And what are the legacies of it? Proportion and scale and timing, seem to be things people don't really. Generally, they know there was slavery in Virginia, but do people have any idea of its evolution and enormity? I don't think so. So I think it can be fact driven and be even more powerful for being so, and that we don't have to generate every footnote because we have links into Encyclopedia Virginia for all these things. So But I think we could, provide the most useful kind of document by making it as concrete as possible, which I think has the benefit of not making it look like a rhetorical exercise, but rather this is a record. What are we gonna do about it? Make sense, y'all?
If I may, I would say, my standard answer always is, it needs to be as long as it needs to be. I mean, I don't want, 40 pages to be a straitjacket. It needs to, there's certain ground that it has to cover. But I agree with you, generally speaking, that, yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's probably a heck of a lot more literature on enslavement in Virginia than there is in California. So we're not starting from zero.
Right.
And I think we can make something that is more impact, has an impact. And as you said, what's our audience? It really is public, we want.
And the
them to
General
be-
Assembly, right?
And yes, that's a political audience as well, yeah.
And the bibliography that you all have been putting together. Anybody who wants to know more about any aspect of this, we can document that this is what this is based on.
And I think the academia around the table also, you speak volumes to credibility as well. And I know there's different backup, but this is, you guys are not, a group of folks who kind of pass through the night. You've been at the table doing this, and I'm not trying to pump you up, I'm just saying you've been at the table doing this work for, how many years, Dr. Ayers, you've been?
Let's just say over 40.
Yeah, and Dr. Kenny from, it's, all of you, and if I started calling names, that shouldn't, but anyway, so this is,
Well, the strength of it, I think, sorry to interrupt, is that it's the public history component
yeah,
that's represented at the table.
yes.
Is that it's not, there's enough doctors running like the doctor's office. As people doing work every day, explaining this to the public, that's what I would emphasize. Much average power people, I mean, not even drugs, but people whose job it is to make this a living present. So I think amplifying is
All right.
Cassandra has her
So
hand up.
you have
again.
something, I'm sorry, because I gotta remember to look up.
That's all right. I wanted to also add that, having another layer of review by state entities or state funded entities, i.e. the Virginia Humanities, as well as the Library of Virginia, helps to provide quite a bit of credibility, because it's not, if you want to, anybody can call anything politically motivated, but we're willing to let our work be reviewed by others and add that piece to it. And that's what scholarship is all about. It's your willingness to allow your work to be reviewed and analyzed by other professionals in your field. And so in having their involvement, it mutes some of the political rhetoric and blowback that may come. It may not come at all, but it may come. And I like the idea that we've been talking about creating a timeline, because so many teachers are really overwhelmed by the new standards. That it just seems to try to catch a lot without saying a lot. And so having a timeline that makes sense, that helps to frame ideas and helps to frame history and helps to frame what's going on in our society and culture, both in Virginia and beyond, really, I think would be a tremendous resource to teachers and to educators and the general public, and it will help us perhaps to, I don't know, I'm trying to find the right word, but to repel in some ways the political hype that is so anti-educational.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on. Before we go to the project manager's update, Dominic Luster's update, just wanted to share something with you all. I had an opportunity actually to came back last Friday, and I sort of did a civil rights probably tour. I went to Alabama, and went to, Birmingham, which is a Street Baptist Church, the Civil Rights Museum, there, and, several other places. We went to the Equal Justice Institute, the Lynching Museum in Montgomery, and then went to, Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. King's birthplace, and Ebenezer Baptist Church, and, you know, the memorial reflection, grave site and whatnot. Just I don't know, sometimes when I went to Equal Justice Institute in the Lynching Museum, I don't know, I just probably left there without words. I just, you know, I don't know if everybody's been there, but it's just, I just without words when I left, that's the bottom line, okay? But what was interesting, there was at the lynching museum, a guy by the name of Jure who was lynched. And he was in Fauquier County. And him and his young lady, he was 23 years old, young lady, 17-year-old, who was the daughter of the person who he supposed to be working for. I think her name was Elvira Coder. And they ran away to Maryland, and the posse went after him, brought him back, and they lynched him, being 23 years old. And Elvira, which is even get sadder because this young lady, 17 years old, who was pregnant, they told her to wait at the hotel, and they never saw her again. She disappeared. So there's no record of her even existing outside of this. And the reason that my attention is drawn to this man is because it was in Virginia, and my maiden name is Jordan. So I got, so I started going to start researching him. There's a book, actually, that just came out in July that was written by Jim Hall. I don't have a clue who he is, but it's called Condemned for Love, in Old Virginia, about this story. So it may be, for whatever reason, something that, you might want to read about, but anyway. It was July the 1st that this guy wrote this book, but he obviously found it interesting enough, or something about it enough to actually write a book in reference to it. But the trip was, again, it just left me, with a lot of thoughts. As much as you be exposed and know and read about and hear about, it just takes you to another place. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you. All right, okay, with Dominique.
Thank you so much. I want to look up that book. What you have in your packet before you is a written version of the report. There were a couple of just tasks or asks of you all from the last meeting that have been taken into consideration and have been written up and are available for you to review. Those updates, just to give you a high level, again, there's more details in the paper in front of you, but at a high level, we are in continued conversations around the report length scope that is still ongoing, incorporating more of the mapping inequality work that was mentioned during the last discussion, as well as some of the data compilation, socio-geographic work as recommended by Dr. Newby Alexander. That's now also being included. That work, Dr. Newby Alexander, is still ongoing. I don't have a complete compilation for you today, but I do hope to have that for you soon. Other things that I want to just point your attention to, following Dr. Ayers' request, last time we did go ahead and reorganize that highlights level of the bibliography into the subcommittee breakdowns. And you'll see that on the third, fourth, and fifth page of the report. I think the ask, if I may, for you is just to continue to review the bibliography as it continues to come out. If there's something that you find is erroneously missing, blame my mind, not my heart. Please just let me know. We'd be happy to get any additional books or articles included in this bibliography. The other thing that I also, or taken away, whichever. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we included several Encyclopedia Virginia links, not knowing actually that this was going to be the conversation today. But if you do have an opportunity to review it as broken down by subcommittees, you'll see maybe 10 or 15, there's a ton in there of Encyclopedia link or Encyclopedia Virginia links already included in the bibliography. There are more. I will say, just for your knowledge, the resources that are included in this bibliography are probably 25 to 30% of what we have. There is so much more. We're happy to include it or not include it based on your decision and scope of the reporting, but there is more about the historical background, the compilation of the institution, resources, even things that are just here at the library that we can include. There's a lot more. Should you choose, just let us know, and we're happy to kind of continue that work forward. The question that I have for you today is, at your request, you would like to have had a resources page to the website added. That request has been submitted and done. These resources, as they appear here in the report, would be linked. So if it's a book, it would have a link to the catalog record for that book, or if it's an article or things like that, it would be linked and available on the website. The question is, based on your reporting schedule, when you would like that page to go live. It can go live whenever you choose, before, after, during, July. It can go live whenever you choose. But just to keep that in the back of your mind, that as you're working on the report, there's the website component that can go live whenever you decide. The way it would theoretically work is kind of if you imagine these resources in a like a drop-down toggle window. So for example, if the category says justice and equity on the page, on the website, it just says justice and equity, you just click on it and it opens to just drop down and reveal the resources that are included here, and they'd all be hyperlinked to the catalog record. And then you can close it so that it doesn't make a very, very long page. It just kind of that's the word, it capsizes each one of the resources into the subcommittee categories. And then the last update that I have for you today is that you will already see some updates to the website. Now, those have been completed. Those new updates include all of our minutes and agendas and any kind of public materials that are linked through Town Hall. Those have now been updated, as well as our recordings, which are available on the library's YouTube channel for the public after the meeting. Those are also now linked to our website. So you can find that information on the meetings page. So I think those are all of my updates. If there are any questions.
Gratitude, thank you. This is friendly, useful. Do you think it would be helpful or not to highlight one or two readings in each session that you found most useful as you did this? Again, in the same spirit of making something that's useful for people, just something to, as you look at it, to say, yeah, this one book is the one that tells you most of what you need to know.
You know, as an archivist, I find that really hard. But I absolutely can. As an example, as I was preparing this document, which is reflective of what's been prepared for the website. For example, in the justice and equity. There's a book, The Color Law, that one I thought was a good one. Of course, it's on the list, and there are plenty of other resources that are on this list, but if you've read, The Color Law, then you'd understand like that could be an example, not to put my own suggestion, but that could be an example of a book that I think could encapsulate a lot.
I agree with that, and I think another characteristic that makes that helpful is it's relatively recent. You know,
Yes.
I think maybe that's a way of people getting oriented in where our thinking is now on these various things.
Do that.
As someone whose name begins with A, it hurts my feelings not to have everything in alphabetical order, but.
I'd be happy to,
Transparent.
again, I don't know if you're familiar with the Half That's Never Been Told, another recent book, and I believe we actually had the author recently here to speak, and so there's a recording that maybe we can link some materials. So I'd be happy to kind of go through each of the subcommittee sections and identify a book, and maybe I can just share that via email for your consideration.
Right.
Thank you. And I'm really like to, you know something about that book, right? I know, I heard, and I'm reading it, and every other page makes me mad. But anyway, okay, Dominic.
That is all that I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of Dominic or anything you want to add? As we go along, maybe something like it. So the commissioners and subcommittee and commissioner subcommittee, are there any updates? I know Dr. Kenny, again, professor he is, and whatever he is, he's in the direction he received. So he has actually his information that's in, that was passed out today, so it should be in
I
everybody.
did not ask that, be passed out, that was,
Okay,
I left it to her wisdom,
Yeah.
and her wisdom.
Yep.
She had asked me at the last meeting, since our committee has not met, well, I did write something
right,
about, some of the background. And I
Yes.
told her I would.
yes.
I was just honoring my assignment, to say, it's just a general statement
Mhm.
tracing the kind of history. Now, there's a book in there, I think, that's really struck me that I hadn't read, is that one, Race for Profit. I did not realize how the banking and real estate industry profited, even after they were placed in the system to make affordable housing available. The end result is that the whole process created more victims, even after the federal government intervened, and that's more contemporary. It's a fairly recent book. The only other thing is I mentioned code and custom. The other three C's that constantly come up when you read about it is cost. Cost gets manipulated. The codes did it, the customs in the community which were rooted in racism, and then one of the ways you find out in the banking is how they manipulated cost to benefit bankers and real estate, but not homeowners.
I had a recommendation, a book recommendation for the committee to consider. It's this book called Freedom to Discriminate. And it is all about how the realtors created a system that always made the housing in Black communities valued less. And therefore they were the prime group who were targeted whenever the cities or states or counties wanted to put a public nuisance or a highway through their area. And then of course they would downgrade their property values even more. And then they would offer a quote unquote fair price for the properties. And the Realtors Association was all white for a very long time, still is mostly white, and is very much tied in with the bank. So this particular scholar, Gene Slater, is the one who kind of picks each little piece out point by point. So it may be something you would like to look at.
And I think, and piggyback as Dr. Kenny, we also, even this whole issue of gentrification, that doesn't just happen because a person decides they want to move into a certain community. That happens because investors and bankers and realtors decide that certain areas would be identified, and this is the area where African Americans who were living there could not get the resources to make the investment in their homes. Then there are other folks of other persuasion, they come in, and all of a sudden, you have an entire community that's been changed, okay? So that is, I think as we look at that, that we also want to, I mean, it's still a modern day approach, 2023 approach of moving folks out and not giving them what they need to remain in their community and other folks moving in. And that's happening all over the country, and we are not excluded here in Virginia and places like Richmond. So it's not because Dr. Kenny wants a house, in a dilapidated community, just he wants one. It's because, and I know of individuals who said, I went to the bank to try to get money to make an investment in my home. I couldn't get the funds. And then the house, leaves one in their hands, and all of a sudden people are, and so there's still ways and approaches that are used to because of, so,
What Dr. Alexander said, one of the things, is how you use transportation infrastructure to confine and contain,
yes,
or to divide and block.
yes,
The other thing is I kind of excited with looking at some of this stuff, and looking again at when you start confining, there's certain things you start denying. The number of times you pick up refuse, simple thing like that, and the toxins that it tends to generate in community, it intersect with the health issues
yes,
and all of these things.
yes,
The lack of recreation facilities and outlets and what it does once you start confining these things, and then documents that show how this was calculated. This was not something that happened after. It was understood in the part of the construction.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I'm able to look back now or kind of reflect. When someone said to me, probably 25, 30, I was on city council at that time, it's been a moment or two, and said to me that Churchill was gonna be the new Georgetown. Churchill area would be the new Georgetown. It was a big thing. Who said that to me? And I mean, I was like, well, that's ridiculous. But $400,000 houses, and some of them still need lots of work. It's amazing to me. Anyway, no use me depressing us, getting depressed. So,
I
yes.
also just wanted to maybe suggest The Sum of Us by Heather McGee, who's an economist, and she talks a lot also about housing and the kind of tricks of the trade in terms of how people are harmed. And I think the second part of the title, I had to look this up to remember, but what racism costs everyone and how we can prosper.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other commission, okay, Dr. Kenny, you finished?
Yes,
Sure. Okay, any other commission want to add anything to their report or research or updates on their particular committees? Okay. All right. And then I think for one moment, we want to, is that in everybody's package, the updates for, just for review a little of the legislation that was put forth. I want us to, in particularly, the recommendations, what was expected of us in terms of what we will be giving back to the public. And on the back page of, I think it's 2 of 2, there were 3 particular after that first paragraph in terms of the legislation, which tells us to identify and compile documentation, the institution of slavery that existed within the United States and Virginia. And then it goes down with a list of things that we were expected to address. But what do we, what the final report, what should it be doing? How should we roll it out in terms of any kind of recommendation, any finding? And number two, talk to the statement said that we were to examine the pervasive institutional system of maintaining inequities in housing, employment, education, economic opportunities, generation wealth, voting rights, and the criminal justice system. And I think that's what we have been doing in terms of some of the work. Number three, recommend methods to promote educational awareness and identify ways to address the systematic and historical implication affecting the quality of life of a significant population of African-American families in the Commonwealth. And I think Dominique and I had some in-depth conversation about this, but it is going to be important, I think, as we sort of finalize the documentation and the information we give to the public. It's going to be important to, and I think I'm hoping we're all clear that there should be some kind of recommendation. And I always use the one hypothetically speaking in terms of the educational system, since that was something that was withheld from African Americans, from slavery, Jim Crow, it went right on down. Then understanding that the equal footing was not there, and sure, there were people who were able to advance and rise above it, but there's still a very large population of individuals who have not had access to education. And even when you look at school systems now, they're still somewhat segregated. So what are the recommendations here? Are there recommendations to say, again, hypothetically speaking, that for higher ed, that there be educational scholarships? For public education, making sure that we provide the resources in communities for the capital investment, for systems that may not have the resources to be able to do that. Making sure that the quality of education that young people have in various communities, that it would also be up to par, so that these young people will have opportunities, and the generation that come behind them will have greater opportunities and access to education. So that's just hypothetically speaking, but we need in that to make sure that there are some kind of recommendations that are coming from this group saying, these are some things that could be given consideration, okay? Go ahead.
It strikes me in number three,
Okay.
the language is not kind of evasive on that.
Mhm.
Ways to address the implication affecting the quality. So I'm just trying to, I mean, that's the closest it comes to saying, make us recommendations of how to fix things, right? Is address the systematic implications.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not very clear instruction of what those might look like. So what I heard you saying is that we should just try to do that we should by addressing them, we're saying
I think we need to say what needs to be stated.
exactly.
Okay. All right. If this seems to be ambiguous to you, I think we as a commission need to, whether it's recommendation, whether it is, we highly believe that this is the best way to take this table that's missing a leg.
Well, the key word there seems to be address.
Right. Yes.
And I think, so that's our mandate. How would we
Yes.
address this?
Yeah.
And so if we explain it, where it came from, and ways that it might be rectified.
Yes.
Does that make sense to everybody? That address seems like a broad enough mandate to, okay. Yes.
Quick question. So sort of following up with that, I'm always reminded of how Virginia took Black tax dollars and that were supposed to go to Black schools. And in the 1940s, the Journal and Guide did an investigation and found that Virginia was taking those dollars and redirecting at least half of those dollars to the tune of anywhere between $2 and $30,000 a year per area to white schools. And that money was never restored. And today you have schools that were built in the 1940s for African American students that are still predominantly Black today. And those buildings have not really been updated. They've not been rebuilt. They still exist. They still have students attending those buildings, and yet they are completely inadequate, dilapidated, and schools that are predominantly white, that are at least 30 to 40 years younger than those schools have been rebuilt. And so you're still seeing a systematic pattern by school boards and officials to provide updated equipment, materials, buildings, resources to predominantly white areas, and leaving out especially those areas in which many people are struggling at or below the poverty line, and they're getting few to no resources to help them. And so if I'm hearing this discussion correctly, then that could be something that we would recommend, that that because there is a systematic, or there's a pattern, a system in place that has not yet been broken, a system of inequality and using dollars, using the way that things are assessed, using poverty and criminalizing poverty. There's still that ongoing process, and many of the people targeted are people of African descent. So is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing, that those are the kinds of things you're looking for to have a discussion about and perhaps make a recommendation about?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, look, personally, I mean, just looking at, based on what you're talking, when I say something about segregated school, some of it is because the tax base in certain communities there may not be, or localities, may not be able to build 15 new schools, okay? So what is the responsibility of the locality? What is the responsibility of the state to make sure? Because so much of this was governed by state actions, okay? So much of what has happened over the years. So I got a little bit agitated.
Is that a way to focus?
I'm sorry, y'all.
No, is that a way to focus our recommendations on things for which the state
Yes.
is responsible?
Yes.
Because otherwise, we can talk about all forms of discrimination and injustice, but focusing on things that were created by the state and that the state can change.
Yes.
Seems to be a good way to.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I just want to just, city of Richmond that I represented for absolutely years. I mean, the resources was not there to build a school in every community, okay? And what they really were trying to just close schools down because they felt like, well, we don't have the resources to rebuild. But the thing about it is, you had a place, the judgment hall was the state government, okay? And was making decisions, even the ones that based on why I, as a little girl, 12, 13 years old, leaving from out of Holland Springs, going to Virginia Rand or Glen Allen to go to school. I mean, it is, all of these things were not governed necessarily by localities, even though they have a hand in it. But there was so much of it that was coming from the state house, okay, from the Capitol. And I just think that at this, if we're going to be truthful and we're going to make sure that it's about facts, then we need to make certain it's about facts.
I'm actually surprised that no one has actually challenged what began with the 1868 state constitutional convention and constitution that set up a public school system based on segregation and unequal funding of the schools. By unequal funding, they were funding it based on the, whether it was a black school or a white school, and with the systematic racism when it came to jobs and so forth, you knew that the black schools would always be underfunded. No one has looked at that. No one has said anything about it. No one has challenged that. And that was put in place specifically to divide people and to create an unequal system. So at the very foundation, it does, and I agree with Ed, it starts with the state, and it starts with the formula that the state created. And even though they've kind of updated a little bit, it's still based on that formula.
You're right, and it can be updated, but it does not mean that there's still not a large population, widespread, folks who are left behind or are behind and still trying to catch up. And that's what we're dealing with in so many ways, yeah. I think my vacation kind of. No, it's not because it's not a program. I haven't decompressed it. Apologize. Okay.
I have one other recommendation that the committee can think about, and that has to do with the highway system in Virginia. The highways were used for two reasons. It often was placed by the state, placed to actually destroy a lot of Black communities. Jackson Ward is a perfect example. And there are no sound barriers. So now you have a law that says any new highways being built or revamped would immediately, would come with the funding for sound barriers. But these older areas still do not have that protection. And I'm thinking even in Newport News, where you come out of the Merrimack Monitor Bridge tunnel, and right, on one side is the shipyard with all that coal dust, and on the other side is the historic Black community that's receiving all that coal dust. There are no barriers, there are no sound walls, nothing. And that's a fairly recent, the 664 is fairly recent, but there's nothing there to protect that community. And even with I-264 going from the downtown Norfolk tunnel, from Norfolk all the way through Portsmouth, there are no sound barriers, and all of that area are Black communities. And so there's perhaps an opportunity, and I think there's been some discussion about it, but an opportunity to look at not only this history and why it was done, but also make recommendations about, and I don't know if this is outside of our charge, but making recommendations about this issue, because it has to do with health, it has to do with well-being, it has to do with equality, and it has to do with housing, because it does impact the value of your homes.
And I was looking at and I think one of the things that need to be determined if we're going to put that in or make that a part of it, where, because you do have housing, employment, education, economic opportunities, generational wealth, the voting rights, and criminal justice system. So I don't know whether, it just needs to make some decision in terms of what is the best, to place that information under what headline.
I think it would first go under health, and then the secondary areas under housing, because it impacts both.
Okay. All right.
on the healthcare subcommittee.
Okay,
Xavier Richardson, so
all right,
I'll
great.
mention to him the next time we meet to incorporate that.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Okay. Moving along here. Okay, I guess there is, at this point, there any other, further thoughts or, recommendation? I think we've been doing it all as we've gone along the way. And then, any edits, anything that you want to think that we need to readdress, like we've done some of it today, making sure that we get that information to Dominique, so that he can, put it into the information of what we do. Also want to ask the commission, make sure you review the resources presented in the project manager reports. And any changes made there, make it, forward it to Dominique. Anything that, any other reading material or resources or articles, make certain that we get that information to Dominique, that she may add it as well, okay? I think that's all of them. Yes, Dr. Alexander.
The education committee also recommended some topical areas for the timeline. I don't know if we ever addressed that, but our effort was to just simply create a different approach when we're
Okay.
looking at the past. How are we framing that particular period of time? And moving us a little bit away from the traditional narratives, which limit, it's just like talking about the American Revolution and limiting it really just to 1776 or 1775 to 1783, or even 81, depending upon whether you want to include the peace accords in it. But, when the American Revolution had a longer arc than that, going further back before 1775. And so just kind of thinking about it from a broader perspective. It was our effort, and I don't know if the committee has had a chance to think about that, because each of our areas would have an opportunity to include that information as part of a timeline by however you frame that topical headline or heading.
Okay. All right. So you're suggesting, this is more of a suggestion based on what your committee will be doing? And are you asking that of all of the committees?
Well, I'm asking if perhaps our suggestions can be discussed as part of it. For example, it's very annoying when I see that when they're talking about the turn of the 20th century and the rise of Jim Crow and all of that, then Black people once again become the victims, as if there's no activity coming from Black people. There's no agency. This is the time period when freedom's first generation went from this enslavement period to becoming professionals, entrepreneurs, factory owners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some, of course, happened before then, but you saw this explosion. You would see Maggie Walker, for example, the first woman in the country become a banker, and she's part of that freedom's first generation. And so if all you focus on is what white society is doing against Black people, then you don't understand and you misinterpret what is happening in that time period, and you gloss over or just completely ignore most of those individuals. And so I think it has to do with how are you wording these topical areas so that you can include all of this. And I'm not saying it's one or the other, but there should be a broader inclusion. It's just like, there are some Black people who were never enslaved in this country. And their history is almost completely erased, as people sort of call all Black people slaves. And that's the same approach that the American government took during the Civil War by labeling all Black people as contrabands when some were free and many were not necessarily contrabands. So, it's that homogenization that's still a part of these timelines.
Dominique? Okay. All right. And you and I have to talk about, on a personal, when we see one another, about those who were enslaved and those who were free during the period of slavery. I know they were considered, but we'll talk about that later. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Did you want to address the recommendations that were presented by the subcommittees, or I'm also happy to just receive your notes and comments via email or help you coordinate meetings for your subcommittees if that is desired or necessary. But there is a paper in the back of your packet, the very last page, is a compilation of the recommendations that came out of your subcommittee meetings in May or June. I can't quite remember where they were. They are exactly as they were that was submitted to me whenever that last time was. They've just been simply compiled into a single document. I know there was discussion on the legislation, and I also want to be mindful that the LVA team can go back and present to you a more subcommittee-based presentation of some kind if that's desired. For more information about the subcommittees, we can provide more books or references. We can kind of do that, so we can wait to have this discussion a little later, or we can have it now. It's completely up to you. Just let us know how you'd like to proceed. But for easy reference, the compilation of your recommendations to date is included in your packet.
And I think that we can just wait till, what time is it now?
It is 2:07.
I think at the next meeting, we could do that. And then if there's any other recommendation that's coming out of this discussion today, overall discussion, we can make sure that they are, a part of it. Okay?
Madam Chair, can I make a recommendation?
Yeah.
Housing committee that I would encourage persons who may not be on the housing committee, who recognize places of intersection, to make recommendations. That will be gladly received. Am I correct,
And I think the issue of, certainly we're going to talk about the gentrification issue. I think that needs to be somewhat, as a more modern day approach of shifting people, shifting communities, and the the methodology of getting it done, and why communities have changed so drastically. In housing, that's all right. Anything else? Any other, in terms of the report? Again, these are the preliminary recommendations that we have here. And anyone that any of these subject matters that you think that it needs to, additional things need to be addressed or certainly put forward. Make sure that we send it to Dominique and she can make it a part of the presentation. Okay, presentation. Anything else? Dr. Newbie, Alexander. That's somebody on my mind. Yeah.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, right. Anything? Okay, Dominique, you?
No, thank you.
Well, then, if all hearts and minds are clear, then we are going to, I forgot the public. Anyone from the public wanting to say anything? I do, thank you. Those cuties were back there.
Hey. Okay, so as always, I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak with you about what you've been preparing and planning. I'd like to remind the task force that all of this work and the planning and hopeful subsequent implementation of what we're doing, it'll all be for naught if it's not 100% clear who it's for. Dr. Newby Alexander, you said earlier, and I know that it's just a part of how we speak now. But you said people of African descent, and that could be people who just got here yesterday who's from Africa versus people who might have been here prior to 1526. And that's the people that I'm here speaking about. Africa America is like this mystical, magical place, right? Where everybody can kind of claim it if you live in America because our origins start in Africa. So I think it's very important for us to delineate or at least be very specific about who this task force is speaking for. And that would be foundational Black America or Black America, but then you'd have to delineate again, are Jamaicans Black Americans? No, they're Jamaican Americans. And then you have to make sure that you're very specific about who we're talking about, because again, all of these other groups of Black people, or at least melanated people here, didn't go through what my ancestors went through. Yes, they've had a bad deal, they've had a bad rap, but at some point when you choose to come to a place and the people there are being subjugated, that is not our fault per se. I mean, it is our global, or I guess our country's fault. We haven't really come to terms. That's what we're trying to do now, but we have to be very specific. And I think that at least every time I come up here and speak, I'm going to make sure that I say that, because I don't want it to be convoluted. I don't want it to be where all of these different people are getting something because something's bad's happened to them, and then you call it reparations, because it's not reparations. Reparations is making sure that it never happens again. But, you know, as we've got the school to prison pipeline and all of these other different avenues that are designed to railroad my community, there's got to be a way to ensure that the laws that are already on the books are applied for us, and that, you know, we get those protections. And maybe that's not reparations, but I do think it should be part of the conversation. Restitution and repatriation, compensation, I talk about that every time. I don't mean to be crass, but a check needs to be cut, like a direct cash payment to my community. Why? Because all of the problems, 100% of the problems could be solved if we had the funds to do it. And we don't have the funds to do it. And we keep getting told that you don't know what you're going to do with it, or you don't know how to do it. And all of these other groups that get payments, they don't have to deal with the same types of questions, or at least they get the payments and then they also get the programs. And I've never said that the programs are bad. I just think that we need to get started. And a lot of the programs are going to take time to get started when we could get started right now doing what we think is best for our families. So thank you again for letting me speak. Dominique, thank you so much for how you're doing the website, because we had one conversation about like how in advance the meetings are. And then from then you've been like on it 100%. And I really appreciate that, because we do travel to get here. So thank you for that. And thank you again.
Thank you. One of the, I think it's important for me to say, and thank you for your input, thoughts, every time you've been here, and those wonderful young people who are back here. You're great. For my grandbabies, they were no chandeliers, but anyway. One of the things that with these subcommittees have just given, you know, they have given the opportunity to be flexible and have the freedom to use their knowledge of history, their you know, intellectual capacity, their research, all of those things, to come and make recommendations. And so one of the things is, as the chair, I think I'm kind of, hopefully I'm the cheerleader so helping to make sure that we are on task and we're getting this done. And Dominique, in terms of the administrative way and approach along with the library, to helping to take, you know, make sure that the records are reflected. But, you know, if someone comes and say it's got to be, you know, we recommend that every person get $1 million, I'm not going to refute it one way or the other. That's their, those committees are given that opportunity to do that. So however they want to reflect, the way of trying to, their thoughts about how we get to a certain place. And so I just wanted to make sure that, and I know you guys have talked a lot about money, it needs to be a check, you know, and may very well be. But we just allow, you know, I guess the committees to determine based on their conversation, what they think is the best approach in making a recommendation to the general assembly. And we can make it, I mean, we can have that front and center, but it means nothing, it's just there. So, but anyway, but I really, so we are very appreciative of every time that you come, and whatever you have to say, because we need to hear your voice, and we're gonna end up taking this up in a bigger way to the public. And I'm sure there'll be others who feel the exact same way. But we, you know, we're all in this together. And trying to get somewhere that we're not yet. Yeah, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, then with that, the meeting for, the Commission to Study Slavery and the subsequent de jure and de facto racial and economic discrimination of African American. This meeting now, the meeting is adjourned. All in favor, say aye. Those that oppose, there are none. Thank you.